Praise the Lord. Good morning. We are so happy to be with you this morning and to share with you some amazing things that are happening around the world that God is doing, working through people to help to get the gospel out, to get the word out that Jesus is coming again and that we don't have to be lost or stuck to this world, that there is something better. And on the line with me today, we have a special guest who's going to talk to us about how God is using him, and it's very interesting. I talked to a lot of people, but what we're going to talk about today is quite unique. On the line with me right now is Brother Don Frost. And Brother Don, how are you today?
I'm excellent, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Praise God. And, you know, I say that what you're doing is very interesting, and we want to get into the projects that you're working on. But before we do, I want, let's talk to the listeners about, you did a live survey where you took a microphone, and if I'm not mistaken, you went to people in the streets and you asked certain pertinent questions, and the responses you got were quite interesting. And I'm going to ask if you can kind of share with the listeners, what exactly were you asking them, and what conclusion did you get from the whole project?
Well, if I could share a little bit of the background, this goes back to 2015, and it was announced, of course, that the Pope of Rome would be coming and speaking to a joint session of Congress. And at the time, there was a group of us that said, and let me just say this, I can do nothing of my own. This project, the projects that we're working on, the projects that have been done in the past have been many people, not just me. And in 2015, when the Pope was coming, several folks called up to the General Conference. I actually even went over to the General Conference headquarters to find out, hey, what are we doing to deal with this issue about the Pope's coming? And nobody seemed to have a plan. And I started saying, we're not doing anything as a church. And then I sort of came under this conviction that, hey, I'm in the church. What am I doing?
Right.
And so several other people had the same conviction. And so we were convicted to go to the Capitol Hill. And, we are Protestant Christians, and what does that mean? Well, that means to protest Rome. And so that's what the Protestant movement is all about, protesting what Rome is doing. And so we went up to Washington, D.C., and we applied for permits to be able to be there with the Pope, and that's a whole other story, maybe for another show. But while we were there, we did get a permit. In fact, while many citizens were able to get special passes from Congress to visit with the Pope, which we also got, we were not to meet with him as friends, but we were there in the halls of Congress to try and educate that there's a different message, that there's a heaven-sent message, and warning the leaders not to clasp hands with the papacy and what the results would be. And while it was at that series there where these government workers would come into these secure area that had the whole area kind of cordoned off, and you had to have special permission to be in these secure locations. And while we were there, as the employees, some of them were special visitors that had gotten passes to visit with the Pope, but other ones were just employees. And they would have to take their name tags off and all this kind of stuff because they didn't want to get in trouble. And we were asking them about the Pope's visit and what they thought of, the Pope's climate change encyclical, and what they thought about having a day to lower emissions and heal the planet, like a Sabbath rest for the land kind of thing. And if they thought that was a good idea, And almost unanimously, the people said, yeah, that's a great idea. If we could just close everything one day a week and lower emissions. And I said, well, what day a week, do you think that the day should be where everything would be closed down? And virtually every person we interviewed said, well, Sunday would be the obvious day. And then we said, well, if people don't honor this Sunday closing law and cease to work on that day, what do you think should be done with those people who don't want to help the environment heal and stuff? Well, they should go to jail. They should be fined. And I mean, it's really amazing how all this came out. And you know what, Mark? What's amazing about this is that in America right now, it's very divisive. You have Republicans, you have Democrats. But what's fascinating about the groups that we interviewed, on the Democrat side, which some people use the term liberal side, I guess that's okay. On that side of the equation, you have people that are very much into saving the environment, environmental issues, and also you have the Democrat Party is a big supporter of labor unions. So labor unions tend to support the Democrat Party. And then on the other side of the aisle, you have charismatic Christians and evangelical Christians that tend to support the Republican Party. And what's fascinating about this particular issue, about having a day of rest, it's good with everybody. The environmentalists love it because we're going to lower the emissions. The labor unions love it. Well, the factory workers are going to have a day off to spend with their families. And the evangelicals love it because they believe that we need to get back to the Bible because the country's falling apart and we need to go back to church on Sunday. So everybody loves it.
Wow.
And this is and Satan has orchestrated things to come to the point where they are right now. And the time is right. The mood is right. The mindset of the people is right to bring in such a law.
Wow. Okay. It sounded like you broke up and I didn't hear you properly for a minute. So you actually got permits to be able to go in and interview some of these people about these issues.
That's correct. That's right. In fact, we visited and gave the Third Angel's Message in a little video series to every single United States senator and congressman on Capitol Hill. And we spent, after the Pope left, we came back. We spent 4 months on Capitol Hill giving health lectures, having meetings in the congressional offices with senators and congressmen, meeting with journalists, meeting with employees, meeting with their staff, and just and I can safely say this: we've given the information. We gave out thousands of Great Controversies, other Adventist publications. We've given out these videos that clearly show about what day the true Sabbath is, when the Sabbath was changed, who changed the Sabbath, and what this power that comes up out of the earth, this beast power that comes up out of the earth, that's going to put a no buy, no sell in place. We identify who that power is, and we gave every single congressman and senator on Capitol Hill this information, every single one.
Wow. That's amazing. And I didn't even know that you were doing all that. And so you're doing it at the highest level. So I know that so now you're telling us you went out there at the highest level, spoke to these congressmen and so forth, ones who enact laws. And we know that laws will be enacted. And you were right there, doing that. But also, you were also at the grassroots. You were down talking to the regular people and asking them about the Bible, or if they've ever heard the name Nebuchadnezzar, I think.
Oh yes. We're now talking about in New York City. Okay, so we did these interviews okay, I'm glad you brought this up, because we did the interviews in Washington, D.C., and we did the interviews in New York City as well. And so I got a little confused there. But here's the thing. We were in Washington, D.C. We did these grassroots interviews in Washington, D.C., and this is what takes us to New York City. Because, see, what happened was when the Pope was in Washington, D.C., he was trying to convince in these backroom deals, and he's still trying to do it, to implement his climate change encyclical. And then after he left Washington, D.C., he flew to New York City, and he had a meeting with the United Nations. So he goes to the leaders of the United States and has this meeting, and then he goes to the leaders of the world and has this meeting. And so what we wanted to do, since we did this effort in Washington to warn the leaders of this nation, then we wanted to go to New York City and warn the leaders of the world. And so what happened was this started a series of events where we went to New York City. We started interviewing the people there, and Ellen White talks a lot about New York City. And basically, yes, there are these statements that New York, that the work that's done in New York is to be a template or an example of the work that's to be done in the rest of the world. And in New York City Conference, or Greater New York Conference, they have this mantra. It's that if you reach New York, you can touch the world. Because, Mark, when you go to New York City, I'm going to say this, there's no place in the world like New York City. And it's right. Not only is it the media capital of the world, it's the publication capital of the world, it's the financial center of the world, it's a fashion center of the world, it's just all these things, but it truly is a melting pot. And so you have, yes, not only through the United Nations are virtually every nation on earth represented in New York City, but when you go into the city itself, there are just every nationality, every religion, every mindset is just there represented. And so what we did was, yes, we went right there in Times Square and we took a snapshot. We just asked people that are just, walking by. And as you see in this interview, these people are literally representative of every different group of people in the world. And we just asked them these basic questions. Have you ever heard of the prophet Daniel? Have you ever heard of Nebuchadnezzar? Have you ever, some people were like, we asked, do you know what the Bible is? And, people would be like, Bible? What's the Bible? And even the people, Mark, that were professed Christians, we would ask them about, just the most basic things. The Ten Commandments. Do you know what the Ten Commandments are? Most people that we survey, they only can remember or even know 1, 2, maybe 4 at the very most of the Ten Commandments. And so the people are so without the message. And what we're doing, Mark, is that, we have a tendency as Christians, and in particular in Adventism, we argue about a lot of things, and that's how Satan would have it. But the fundamental beliefs, and I'm not talking about necessarily numbering them. I'm talking about the foundational teachings of the Daniel 2 story, the mark of the beast, the sanctuary doctrine, the state of the dead, the Sabbath. These fundamental things we really are taking for granted because the vast majority of the people that are out there have never heard these truths. They don't know anything about it. And we're really just... We need to get this message out there. We need to come together and take the central themes of what we believe and share them because people are just perishing in ignorance. And what we've been able to show, I think on the video that you watched, is this is absolutely the case. And so if we're going to take this message to the world, we have a plan. We have a plan. But you know what? The great news about this plan is we didn't come up with it. We didn't come up with it. And what the plan is, Mark, is that this message of the third angel is to go to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And we have found a way that we can do this because by having a special type of evangelistic presentation in New York City, as the people and Ellen White talks about this was the methodology of Christ. How did Christ reach the world? Well, there was a city in Christ's day called Capernaum, and Capernaum was a crossroads. And Ellen White says that Jesus would go and he would sit there in the marketplace in the city, and not only was Capernaum a crossroads, it was a pleasure resort area, and so people would come from distant lands, and Christ would share the gospel message with them, and then Ellen White says that they would then take that message to far and distant lands. And so we can do the same thing by going to places like New York City and pleasure resorts all around the world. Places like New York City, like Orlando, like Las Vegas, these places that we tend to want to stay away from. Well, those are the places that we need to go to, because the people are coming to these places looking for something. And if we can give them the message there, then they'll carry it back to distant lands. And you know what, Mark? That's not only effective evangelism, but it's cost effective. You see what I mean? We give them the information in these central locations, and they themselves take it back to all over the world. We basically turn them into disciples, right?
Yes. Yes. And so you're laying down the foundation. I mean, you went to DC, you went to New York, you did the surveys, talking to people live, and you're getting a good idea of who's out there and what people and what they know. So now, talking about the New York project now, you are actually going to do something there that is very unique. And let's talk about that and how that came about. Let's talk about what you're going to do and how that actually came about so people understand. And when we're done, I will send people to the, we're going to have the video up on the app so they can watch it themselves. But tell us about what's going to happen with the New York project.
Well, there's so many facets to the New York project, and what's exciting about this project is any Seventh-day Adventist in the whole world can be a part of this project, because what we're doing is we're trying to create a hook. And let me just I'll give you the details here in a minute. We live in a busy world, and people don't have time. They're hustling and bustling around and all this kind of thing. Their minds are on a million different things. And what is it that we can do to grab their attention? And so we have a plan, and the plan is not original with us. We actually have Spirit of Prophecy documentation. I'll share some of this in a minute, but the plan is this. We're going to build a statue, the image statue, the Daniel 2 image statue, and it's going to be 90 feet tall. Okay? This is the head of gold, chest and arms of silver, waist and thigh of brass, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay, right? Just like in the Bible. But we're going to build it to the scale height of the image that Nebuchadnezzar built. Okay? Now Nebuchadnezzar built an all-gold one, but we're going to build it in the segmented metallic section, just like in the story in Daniel 2. But what happened, if you notice in the story in Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar built this image of all gold, and he ordered the people from all over the world, all these, and notice what they were. They were people of position and power from all over the world, and they came to view this image that Nebuchadnezzar made. Now, of course, he gave a commandment to bow down to it, but we're not going to do that. We're using this as a tool to illustrate what's coming on the world, because in this story, Mark, the main line of the story is that this rock, it comes and it hits the image on the feet, and it grinds all the image into powder, and that rock is Jesus Christ, and the feet is the time that we're living in today. And in fact, in the story, the legs represent the Roman Empire, and it divides up into these 10 kingdoms, right? Well, in Daniel chapter 2, it says that these kingdoms would try and cleave one to another, and that they would mingle themselves with the seed of men. In other words, they were going to try and come together again. And in the days of that they would do that this rock would come. And Mark, we have this amazing event that's going on in world history, and that is the breakup of the EU. You see, they've been trying to put it back together again, but it's failed again. And so we have this opportunity to tell the story how it's never going to go back together. And here we are in this time where we're trying to put it back together, and this is when the rock comes. This is when Christ comes. A very simple story. Now, I want to say this. When we first thought of this idea to put an image in New York to grab people's attention, even myself, I thought, well, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 4, the second commandment, it says not to make graven images. It does say that, but then it goes on to say in verse 5, not to bow down and worship them. And so at first, even myself, when we thought about having this image there in New York City, we said, well, that's a little icky. It's kind of like making a graven image. But, God, Mark, is not the author of confusion. And so he wouldn't tell people not to make a graven image and then bow down to it, and then tell them that they couldn't make graven images by giving them the example. For instance, in Numbers chapter 21, in verse 8, the Bible says this, And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. Now this is talking about when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, and they were having these serpents, and they were coming and biting them. And in verse 9 it says, And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it on a pole, and it came to pass that when the serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. And so that was a representation of Christ. Now, they weren't to bow down to that brazen image. It was used as an objective lesson. In addition to that, we have in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verses 17 through 20, where God commands Moses to build this Ark of the Covenant, make it of gold, and put these two statues of cherubim facing each other, with the mercy seat in between. And then when you get to Ezekiel chapter 41, God is giving instructions in verses 17 through 21 to Ezekiel about how he wants the temple built. And what do you have in there? Well, you have these cherubims and these palm trees, and you have the cherubims have two faces, and they face one another. And so what you have is this story where God is using these images as illustrations, as educational tools, but he's not telling people to bow down to the images. And so we're doing the same thing. In fact, Mark, if those that are listening want to look at some quotes on the Ellen White CD-ROM, if you have the Ellen White CD-ROM, in the Pioneer section of your Ellen White CD-ROM, there's a story about what our pioneers were doing in 1844. And Mark, would it be okay for me to read a quote here from this?
Sure, go ahead.
This is from Signs of the Times, and it's from February 14th to 31, 1844. And the particular date here is, it says May 29, 1844, Volume 7, number 17. And it's titled The Cause in Cincinnati. So if you want to look it up in the word search box, just type in The Cause in Cincinnati. And this is what it says. The meetings are still continued at the Great Tent. And by the way, the Adventists, when they were going around in 1844 preaching of the soon coming of Christ, they had this Great Tent, and it was the largest tent in the United States. So they're traveling around with this Great Tent, and it says, and have increased in interest since our last account. Brother Brewer lectured on Sabbath a.m. upon the seven seals. The congregations were left much interested. Brother Fitch lectured in the afternoon, briefly going over the 2nd, 7th, and 8th chapters of the prophecies of Daniel. The rise and fall of the four universal kingdoms that were precede God's everlasting kingdom was illustrated by a very impressive manner, by the aid of a carved image representing the one in Daniel chapter 2. When proof was adduced that the ancient Babylon fell, the head of the image was taken off and laid aside. And so the breast and arms and belly and sides, and then the legs, leaving nothing but the feet and toes. None but the willfully blinded could help seeing that we are living in the very last days. Brother Fitch lectured again in the evening on Daniel 11 and 12. More attentive congregations could not be found than we had throughout the day. The number that thronged the tent could have been not much less than 5,000 persons at each meeting. So here we are, 1844.
Wow.
They have this large image of Daniel chapter 2 set up in the tent. And what happens is they're having 5,000 people come to these meetings, to each of the meetings. Now, here's the amazing part about it, Mark. The city of Cincinnati in 1844, I don't believe, I think the population was around 18,000 people. So
okay.
you're having 4,000 people come out to a meeting because of these techniques that are being used in a city of 18,000. And Mark, I'd like to know in the cities of America when the last time we had meetings where 4,000 people were coming out to a meeting. I'm not saying It doesn't happen,
wow.
but this was a regular event. In addition to this, in the Pioneer section, under Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, page 440, paragraph 3, it says this. It says, Fitch used interest-arresting, I love that, interest-arresting visual aid methods. When he lectured in the Big Ten on Daniel 2, he used a large statue made in sections to represent the great image. As he told of Babylon's fall, he would remove the head and so on with other sections. When only the feet of the modern nations were left, the people understood that we were truly living in the last days. And so this, we would love to, in some way take credit for this, but Mark, this is a technique that's been used ever since the inception of the church. And it's, what does it say here? What does the quote say here? It says it's interest arresting. In other words, you have people that are going about their daily life, and all of a sudden they hear about this big image, and you got to go see it. Or what is that image? What does it mean? What does it represent? This image being set up, because of the different colors of the image and everything, it begs the question, what is this? And this is a tried and true method. Now, I have many other quotes from Mrs. White talking about, and I don't know how much time we have, but in the book Evangelism, in section 7, there's a whole section, and Mrs. White, and if you want at some point during the talk, I can share some of these quotes. There's a section called Truth Teaching Devices, and Mrs. White goes over how we really need to be using these teaching devices like this and how they're going to be used more and more in the closing work.
We have some time if you want to find some of those quotes, and
I have them right here.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'll just hit some of the highlights. So again, in the book Evangelism, section 7, under Truth Teaching Devices, I'll just hit some of the highlights here. It says, some of the headlines here. It says, prophecies taught by Simpson. Now, who was Elder Simpson? W.W. Simpson was one of the most successful big city Seventh-day Adventist evangelists. He did a lot. He used a lot of different charts, and he would have charts of the Ten Commandments. He would have charts of the image of Daniel 2. But there's another amazing thing that he did, and this is from Evangelism 204, paragraph 3. She says this about Elder Simpson. She says, Brother Simpson, dwells especially upon the prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation. He has large representations of the beast spoken of in these books. So what Elder Simpson would do is he didn't just preach out of the Bible, which was great, but he would make these large representations of the beast of Daniel and Revelation, And it says, and she goes on to say, these were an ingenious invention, and she goes on to say, thus he holds the attention of the people. So he's using these methodologies to reach the people, and this is what she says in paragraph 4 on page 204. She says, the labors of Elder Simpson remind me of labors put forth in 1842 and 44. So he is not even original. He seems original in his day, but he's using the methodologies that were brought forth in 1844. She goes on to say, he has large lifelike representations of the beast and symbols in Daniel and Revelations, and these are brought forward at the proper time to illustrate his remarks. She says this in paragraph 2 of page 205. Elder Simpson is arousing a good interest by his meetings. People of all classes come out to hear and to see the life-size images that he has of the beasts of Revelation. And she goes on to say this, Mark, in the same quote, in the same paragraph, a great many Catholics come to hear him. These Catholics are drawn out because they see these images, and it piques their curiosity. In paragraph 3, she says this, I am pleased with the manner in which our brother Simpson has used his ingenuity and tact in providing suitable illustrations for the subjects presented, representations that have a convincing power. And listen, such methods will be used more and more in the closing work. So she's not only saying that this is the right way to do it, she says in the closing work, this is going to be used more and more. And she goes on to say this, the Lord has been working with Elder Simpson, teaching him, who is teaching him? The Lord is teaching him how to give to the people the last warning message. His method of making the words of the Bible prove the truth for this time, and his use of symbols presented in Revelation and Daniel are effective. So we have this major endorsement from the Spirit of Prophecy that not only should we be using these methods, but it is the way that we're to end the closing work, by these representations that capture people's attention, and then we can share with them the everlasting gospel. And do it, Mark, in a very, very quick way. In a very quick way.
Now, if the goal is to arrest people's attention, where exactly in New York are you going to place this thing?
Well, this is what our plan is. We've had many meetings in New York with representatives of the city of New York, and they have granted us that provided that we are able to meet certain criteria, a place to put this in Times Square. Now, Times Square is in central Manhattan. It's the place where everybody congregates, okay? It's just, I mean, if there ever was a Sodom and Gomorrah kind of place, it's Times Square, okay? And it has millions of people a day pass through it, but about 330,000 people a day on foot walk by this spot where we want to put this. And the great part about this, Mark, is that when literature evangelists use this tool to hand out these little booklets, brochures, Great Controversies, whatever they're going to hand out, at the base of this image, there's 330,000 people today, Mark, and guess what there is tomorrow? Another 330,000, and they're different people. You see, you can. This is a market here that can never be saturated. So I want you to think about this. You want to think about economical evangelism? Well, if you wanted to take your materials and your message and take it to every single place on the globe, the freight, the shipping, the cost would just be unbelievable, right? But if you go to a place like this, where the people are from all over the world, and you're handing them this material, they're going to pay for the cost of transportation, of shipping, of distribution. And so you just have these centrally located areas like New York, and they just come through, and you're just giving them this material, and they're just taking it to the whole world. It's really, I mean, and this methodology is the methodology of Christ. Ellen White endorses it. So what we're doing is we're taking one Ellen White Bible-endorsed method, and we're infusing it with another Spirit of Prophecy Bible-based method, and we're joining them together, and then we're joining them with the next one, which is literature evangelism, and we're putting them all together. It's a win-win-win scenario. And in addition to that, Mark, guess what's right there at Times Square? All the news media outlets are right in that location. ABC News, literally right out the front door from where we want to put this. They do their morning shows there in the morning, Mark, and they go outside and they interview people too, just like how we do it. And this thing's going to be standing right there. Now, here's what the parameters are. This image has to be a work of art. We can get a permit right now. We could get a permit right now to put it there, but the permit fee is $33,000 a day because this is a very visible spot. But we can get it there for free, Mark. We can get it there for free as long as we submit it to the city as a work of art. And so what we have is we have commissioned an artist. He's more than an artist. An artist doesn't capture what this man has the capability of doing. He's built factories and automated systems and amazing inventions and stuff. And he's also a carver and a painter. This guy's name is Herb Larson. And he's been commissioned to build this image. And so him and his team are working on laying out the engineering of how they're going to build this image. And as funds continue to come in, the material is being purchased and this and that, and the image will be built. It's going to be made out of plates of aluminum, quarter-inch plates of aluminum, and these plates are going to be faceted together, sort of like if you look at a TV screen and you get close, you see these little pixels, and but when you go back, you can't see them that well. Well, we're going to use these, or Herb's going to use these plates of aluminum. He's going to fasten them together, weld them all together, and then there's going to be a central steel core in the middle of the image with rods that hold the outer skin on. And then these thousands of little faceted plates are going to make up about 10 pieces that are larger in size, and these 10 pieces will then be trucked to Times Square, where they'll be built one on top of another and welded together in place over about a day or two period. And then we'll have an unveiling. And Mark, what we want to do is we want to send out invitations to these world leaders from the United Nations, to the players on Wall Street, to the media people, and invite them to come to the unveiling of the statue. And then while they're there at the unveiling, we can take advantage of telling them about what the statue means and what it is and what the prophecy is, and more importantly, tell them about the rock that's going to smite the image on the feet and let them know that that rock is Jesus Christ.
Wow. Okay, and so if you have, your permit will be free as long as this thing is submitted as a work of art, I take it.
That's correct. And so what's going to happen is the image is going to be built, and it is going to be a work of art. I mean, there's going to be nothing in the whole world like it. And you know what, Mark? Yes, the images are going to cost to build $1.5 million. In this same chapter in Mrs. White's writings, she talks about how we need to make devices, and they need to be cost-effective. Well, let me explain. I know that $1.5 million seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But let's talk about the reality of the situation. I have many friends that are evangelists, Seventh-day Adventist evangelists, and I have a good friend of mine, and he told me that one of these city evangelistic efforts, you know, a medium to big city evangelistic effort, is the cost of that effort is about $90,000. And if you do a good job with advertising, and the church or the churches that are really behind this, you may have 500 people come out to the meeting. Okay? Now, we're not talking about how many people are baptized. We're not talking about how many people join the church. We're just talking about after you spend $90,000 interesting 500 people to want to hear what you have to say, just the interest alone. So let's do the math here. Let's just round up the 90,000 to 100,000. So you're talking about 15, 16 city evangelistic presentations. And if you can get 500 people to come out, you're talking about, for $1.5 million, you might be able to arrest the attention of, let's say, at the most 10,000, 20,000 people for $1.5 million, right? We're talking about arresting the attention of millions of people, not over the course of a 20-week evangelistic series. We're talking about arresting the attention of millions of people every single day for week after week after week after week for $1.5 million. We're talking about a scale here of pennies on the dollar. We're talking like 0.0002 cents on the dollar per person reached, as comparison to like $7, $8, $10 a person using the standard method. So it is the most inexpensive, most cost-effective methodology that I know that one could even dream of using.
So, and you'll have literature being given out as people come. I guess they'll get online and they'll come up the base.
Yes. Now, let me just say this. Whenever you do a work, any kind of evangelism in an area, we're counseled by the Spirit of prophecy that you need to have a binding off methodology to do the work, or you're better off not doing it. So what we've done is we've gone to the Greater New York Conference. We've gone to some of the local churches, and we're not going to try and recreate the wheel here. There's about 1 million Seventh-day Adventists that live in the Greater New York area. I mean, did I say million? I meant 100,000. And so there's plenty of people on the ground. So what we're going to work on is motivating the Adventists that are already in that area, and getting them to get involved with literature evangelism, and allowing the churches, the local churches, the churches that are in the region, to get on board and take advantage of this event that's going to happen in New York, so that the teams of people can bring their own literature. Yes, we'll have some recommended literature. We want to make a little booklet specifically on the Daniel 2 story. We'll also have stuff on the internet where people can, take their phone and, hit a little code and it'll bring it up and things of this nature. But we're encouraging Seventh-day Adventists in that region to be involved with this project, give out these little booklets, give out great controversies, and do whatever they can to befriend people, and of course invite people to their churches. And we're also going to be encouraging all the Seventh-day Adventist churches in that whole region at the same time to take advantage of the media publicity that's going to surround this image, and for their friends and neighbors, hey, you heard about what's going on in town with this big image? Hey, come to our church. We want to explain what this is all about. So we want to encourage evangelistic meetings centered on the Daniel 2 theme to be done all over the whole city.
Have mercy. Well, praise God. That's praise God. And if we have reporters from SWM Radio there, then we will we could help in getting the literature out, and even getting people to download even the app to their phone, which comes with Bible studies and everything straight to their phone. We could do that in New York, and as well in the other place that you're working. Now let's kind of get in that direction. We have like 15 minutes to discuss your other two projects.
Okay.
And so you have the project going in New York, and this is exciting how this could work out. Like you said, reaching millions of people, and a lot of these people are showing evidence of not even understanding what's even in the Bible in terms of the Ten Commandments and who these Bible characters were and so forth. So it can pique their interest. But it seems like you have something that can happen in the Caribbean as well. So we can start first and foremost. You have roots in the Caribbean. I didn't even know your parents were on the island of. Go ahead.
Well,
your grandparents.
My grandparents, yes.
Okay.
My family relocated to Jamaica for 20 some odd years, and my great grandfather was a horticulturalist, and he worked in developing various planting methods and that were used in Jamaica in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so all my grandfather's siblings were born in Jamaica. I've never been there myself, but they went there. Wow. And they were Seventh-day Adventists, and they were very evangelistically minded. So I have these roots in Jamaica, but I've never been there. I'm looking forward to visiting Jamaica this spring for this project that we're doing in Jamaica. It's the same kind of project that we're doing in New York City, but a group of Jamaicans came to us and they said, we love this idea about what you're doing in New York. Can we do it in Jamaica? And the first thought was, wow, that's make two images. But we came up with an idea, and that idea was to make a second image, but make it out of something different. So the image in New York City is going to be made out of metal, and the image in Jamaica we're going to make out of wood. We're taking this huge log from the Pacific Northwest, and we have a team of wood carvers, and we're going to carve this huge giant statue out of one of these trees. And these trees in the Pacific Northwest, some of them are like 7-8 feet in diameter. So we're going to make this 40 foot tall image of Daniel 2, and then we're going to electroplate the wood with a metal in the right colors of the Daniel 2 image. And then the plan is that we're going to put it on the north coast of Jamaica. Right now we're looking at the Montego Bay area because, once again, Ellen White says put it in these tourist destination areas, right? And here's what's fascinating, Mark. The New York project was the thing that we were focusing on first, but so about 4 months ago we launched the Jamaica project, and the Jamaica project is surpassing the New York project, and so the image for Jamaica is going to be done much sooner than the one in New York, and we actually hope, and we're going to have evangelistic meetings in Jamaica. We hope to have the image in Jamaica. We're going to ship it in a big shipping container by September, October time period is when we'll be putting it up.
Wow. So you've already raised the funds needed for Jamaica.
The funds to build the image and to carve it and all that kind of stuff are already in the hopper. We do have to still raise funds for a concrete foundation in Jamaica. So when we get to Jamaica, we have to build a concrete foundation that we can then bolt this image to so it doesn't fall over. We don't want to have a Dagon situation. But this is, again, not for worshiping. Right. It's a tool. And then the Seventh-day Adventists that are in Jamaica, we will work with them not only to have evangelistic meetings for the folks there locally, but internationally. And then this thing can be used as a tool to give out literature because the north coast of Jamaica is like New York. People are coming to Jamaica. They want to get away from the rat race. They're looking for something new. They want peace. They're going to Jamaica looking for something that they don't have in their life. And we can take advantage of this by giving them material and information about Christ. And they're going there for one thing, and they get this. And so it's perfect.
Right. And you will have the same plan to have literature passed out all over the island as a result. So,
Yeah.
and that, yeah, that's a big plan, a big undertaking in and of itself, outside of the image.
And
So,
Mark,
get that.
let me just say this. Don't know how much time we have left, but Seventh-day Adventists, not only in Jamaica, Jamaica's in trouble right now. There's some, Jamaica's having tough times, but America's in trouble right now. Everywhere is in trouble right now, and within the church, within Seventh-day Adventists, we need a revival and reformation, and we need to turn away from all this things that take our attention, the controverted points, these various issues, and I'm not saying their issues aren't important, but what it's doing, Mark, is it's distracting us. It's taking our focus away from the things that we need to focus on, and so we really, really need something, and projects like this, where the people can, share these things with their friends. Many people tell me, I travel a lot, Mark, they tell me, with the things going on in my church, I can't even invite people to my church right now. There's so many things going on. I don't feel comfortable doing this. Well, that's true. And I would say, though, that you should do it anyway. But listen, with this project right here and others like it, and I'm sure that the Lord is raising up people all over the world doing different and unique things, draw their attention to these kind of projects. Share these books. Get out the great controversy.
Yes.
Don't worry about how they're going to be affected by your local church or people or whatever. Just do it. Get the message out there. This is what we need to do.
Amen. Now, we have like 8 minutes left, and you have a third project that you're working on. And so let's share with everybody what that is and how this all ties in together with the other two projects.
Okay, this third project, years ago, Mark, I got one of the first Ellen White CD-ROMs when they first came out, like 30 years ago. And I remember going through the CD-ROM and seeing this quote about this city that was going to be destroyed by an immense ball of fire. But in the original CD-ROM, the city wasn't mentioned. Now, a couple of years ago, when the rest of Mrs. White's manuscripts were released, and I started poring over it, just like with other people, I came across these quotes, and I'm not the only one, so I don't want to take credit for that. But here's these two quotes right here. I'm going to read the first one. This is from MS 154, 1904. While I was in Nashville, a scene opened before me. A great ball of fire seemed to fall from heaven, and from it went forth flashes of light. When these flashes of light would strike a building, the building would burn like tinder. And then I heard someone say, I knew that this was coming. These are the judgments of God, and that I knew they were coming. You knew, said another. You were my neighbor. Why did you not tell me these things were coming? Why did you not warn others? Okay, now let me share this other quote. This is from New Releases, MS 188, MS 188, 1905. So this is a year later. She says, when I was at Nashville, I had been speaking to the people, and in the night season there was an immense ball of fire that came right from heaven and settled in Nashville. There were flames going out like arrows from that ball. Houses were being consumed. Houses were tottering and falling. Some of our people were standing there. It's just what we expected, they said. We expected this. Others were wringing their hands in agony and crying unto God for mercy. You knew it, they said. You knew that this was coming and never said a word to warn us. They seemed as though they would almost tear them to pieces to think they had never told them or given them any warning at all. So this is the project, and there are several, probably about 8 more quotes dealing with the same event, and the bottom line is this. Mark, Nashville, Tennessee is going to be destroyed. And it's going to be destroyed by an immense ball of fire. Now, if you go on YouTube and research other sources, scientists and people that are, study phenomenon like asteroids, they refer to these asteroids as balls of fire. So this immense ball of fire comes out of space, comes out of heaven, and it lands in Nashville. And there are many other quotes that Ellen White has to corroborate this. And so, Mark, here's the amazing thing about this. These writings have just been released in the last couple of years. If you look at these writings very closely, you'll see that people knew that this was going to happen, and when they start talking about it, it actually happens. That's the part of the prophecy that is really amazing. So here it is. We know this is going to happen. People are starting to talk about it. People have even, for instance, you can go online to Steve Wallberg has put out a paper about Nashville.
Yes.
So when people start talking about it, it happens. And so what we're doing is we're trying to mobilize literature evangelists and anybody who will help in the Nashville region. And so people have called me from eastern Tennessee, from western Tennessee, from central Tennessee, and we're laying plans out to have evangelistic efforts there in the Nashville area to warn the people of Nashville about these events coming. And you know, Mark, Ezekiel chapter 33 tells us that if we don't go and give the warning to the wicked, that their blood will be on our head. So we have this responsibility to warn Nashville. And you know, it's true that thousands of cities, Mrs. White says thousands of cities are going to be swept away. But we're told specifically that Nashville is going to be destroyed. And it's like a triage. You know, you go to the emergency room in a hospital, you're going to triage. You go in, you have somebody has a broken arm, but somebody's having a stroke. You're going to take the stroke person first, right? You're going to help them first because they're in more critical, dire need. And so what we're saying is that we do need to take the message to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. But Mrs. White has specifically said that Nashville is going to be destroyed. So they're in a critical condition. And in another place, Mrs. White talks about that Nashville would be the center of the work in the South. And we know that we had a college there at one time, a true education with E.A. Sutherland, and that whole thing that kind of just fizzled out in the 1960s when the church took over the college there, and it just kind of went by the wayside. But you know, when the thing has gone from the Lord's mouth, it's going to be achieved. And so if the Lord said that Nashville is going to be the center of work in the southern United States, it's going to be the center of work in the southern United States, one way or another. And we want to encourage people, if those that are listening, at some point we'll have a number where those that are on the ground from various churches and congregations and individual in the whole Tennessee area, we're going to have a series of meetings starting in April of this spring to lay out plans on how to most effectively reach Nashville. And we're also working on a documentary to highlight what's coming on Nashville. So very exciting, but very urgent, very solemn times we're living in.
It is. Now, it's possible, right? Say what happens in Nashville, these balls of fire, it could be the result of even a terrorist attack, you think?
Anything's possible, Mark. Absolutely. I mean, it could be. I mean, some people have said it. Sounds like a hydrogen bomb explosion. I'm not going to argue that. Only thing I know is that it's going to be destroyed. And so whether it's a meteor, we're saying it's a meteor because of the nature of the language and how it comes from space and all this kind of thing. But whether it's that or something else. You know, Mark, there was an event that happened in Adventism, and this is brought out in Mrs. White's writings in The Great Controversy, and it's dealing with the events of August 11, 1840. And Mrs. White talks about, and here's the key phrase, if you look this up in Great Controversy word search, another amazing fulfillment of prophecy. Another amazing event of fulfillment of prophecy excited widespread interest. So in the year 1838, one of the Adventist pioneers, a guy named Josiah Litch, he predicted the fall or the declension of the Ottoman Empire in August of 1840. And then only 10 days prior to its accomplishment, he said it's going to end on August 11, 1840. And Ellen White said that event was exactly fulfilled. And what happened was she says that message brought impetus to the Advent movement, and it rapidly grew from 1840 to 44. So what happened was a group of God's people went out and they said, we believe, according to Bible prophecy, this is going to happen. And when it happened, then they started listening to what the Adventists were saying on other subjects. And so what we're saying is we need to do the same kind of thing. We need to go to Nashville, and we need to educate people that there has been a prophet among us, that God gave us these messages through Ellen White, and that if we tell them beforehand, when the event happens, people are going to come to us and say, well, what else did she say? And that's the message for Nashville.
Amen. Amen. Well, Don, you have 2 minutes. You need to give the website and then share, what you want the people to know, before you get off the line. You have a couple of minutes. Share. Go ahead but first give your website so they can have that.
Okay. So the website is called healtheirland.org. Heal there is spelled THEIR land, LAND.org. And this website is not just people should know there's multiple ministries coming together for this project. It's not just me. It's laymen, it's pastors, it's conference pastors, it's independent pastors. Just group of people from all over the world, not just in the United States, supporting these endeavors. And if you want to learn more about these things, go on the website. And of course, we'll be posting soon about Nashville, about what's going on in Jamaica, and you can watch what we're planning on doing in New York on healtheirland.org.
Amen. Amen. And I appreciate, this is not an easy undertaking, what you're doing. And I appreciate the zeal and the focus to get it done. We're even considering, we're having meetings ourselves and about having reporters in the area of these places where we would go with microphones and talk to people and ask them if they know who Daniel was, or if they ever heard the name Nebuchadnezzar and so forth. And based on how the interview goes, we can invite them to go over and get more literature. And so we're looking at the evangelism aspect of it as well in these locations. So, Don, thank you so much for taking time out. And what we can do is bring you back every, 3-4 weeks or whatever to do updates of what's going on.
My pleasure.
And so we're excited. And as we tell more and more people, we can get them involved and excited as well. So we thank Don for coming on and sharing with us. It was a blessing. I've been blessed. And what we're going to do now, we're going to go into our break. And on the other side of the break, we'll come back with a devotional, and Pastor Bourne will give the morning manna, and then he'll give the daily briefing. So we thank you all for coming on the line. We thank Don Frost for coming and sharing with us, and we look forward to having him back. We'll see you guys on the other side of the break, and we thank you all for listening to SWM Radio.